Welcome to Gut Matters podcast with Casa de Sante, the virtual gut clinic. Today's guest is Dr. Cindy Tsai. Dr. Cindy Tsai is an award-winning board-certified internal medicine physician, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, integrative wellness expert, and wellness life coach who is committed to helping successful, accomplished women who are still feeling unfulfilled despite checking off all the boxes to lead healthy and meaningful lives with ease.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the God Matters podcast. And today we're really happy to welcome Dr. Cindy Sai. She's an internal medicine physician and expert in integrative medicine. I'm really happy to have you here today, Dr. Sai.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks again. Can we start off by you giving us a little bit of background about yourself and what you've done in the past and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So, I'm board certified in internal medicine. Ever since I was young, I wanted to become a doctor because I thought being a doctor was the best way to help people. And I worked really hard going to all the top schools, Johns Hopkins, Dartmouth, Ivy League education, checked off all the boxes. And on the surface, everything looked good. But along the way, towards the end of my medical training, I got sick. And I talked about it in my TEDx talk about what it was like to wake up one day not being able to see, which
Wow.
was terrifying. And I remember the whole room was dark and blurry. I went to see different doctors and they couldn't tell me what was wrong. And it was really a wake up call for me to really pause and to pay attention to what was actually going on. And I realized that our body has its own intelligence and how it talks to us. And we need to pay attention to these messages. And so it really started me on this journey looking at integrative wellness, integrative medicine, really looking at the whole picture and getting to the root cause. And I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition impacting my eyes that could have led to full blindness. And
Oh,
yes, I started on the serious medications like steroids, immunosuppressants. But I also wanted to get better and to not just be on medications for the rest of my life, right? And so, really, it's been my own healing journey, really coming into contact with all these different other modalities outside of Western medicine that really healed me. And so it really allowed me to become an advocate in this space, to become and really do a lot more training, education, awareness, and to help others see that there are so many other ways that they can get better, and that it really is about being in full alignment with who you are. And so it transitioned into focusing on life coaching and really helping people reconnect with who they are so that they can have that mind, body, spirit alignment and be in their best health.
awesome, awesome. So I think a lot of us can really relate to that because people talk about for example, with IBS and also some other digestive diseases, the brain gut connection. So I'm sure that's something that you're pretty familiar with. Can you tell us a little bit more about it from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, as I dove into my healing journey and really learned about looking at the root cause, I learned that the brain and the gut's very much connected, right? We can't look at them separately. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times we forget that we are one being, like one body, all in one, right? We sometimes only look at one system, right? One symptom, and we treat
Yeah.
that separately. And so I always give the analogy, when I was seeing patients before and now working with clients, it's like we don't want to just spray water on the yellowing leaves of a plant, right? We
Yeah.
need to actually look at the root cause and look at the soil and the roots and really nourish that so that we can help revive the plant for good. And so it's really this understanding that in our gut, we know that there are so many really important microorganisms in there that really help regulate our bodily functions, with all the different chemicals, hormones, all the things. And it all has to work together seamlessly. And so it's really important to know that, what's going on in your mind, your brain impacts what's going on in your body, and vice versa. And it's really about paying attention to all of it so that you can figure out what works for you.
Exactly. I just remember from my own experience when I was working in a very stressful corporate job, and medical. I was a officer, chief medical officer, and really busy, very hectic. And I had kids, and the whole life was pretty stressful. And I had a few episodes where, when things were very stressful at work, I would have really bad cramps, abdominal cramps, and pains. This had never happened to me before. I ended up going to the hospital a couple of times and getting all sorts of tests, trying to find out what was wrong. In fact, one of the times was when we were in Israel on a meeting at a meeting at an executive meeting, and I was in Israel, and I had just had to take time off. Of course, it was a high pressure meeting. I had to take time off to go
Yeah.
to the hospital in Israel and get x-rays and all sorts of tests, and they didn't find anything. And then I realized when it happened the third time that it seemed to come when I was very stressed, that I would have this I mean, I would literally be quarreling off in bed in pain, and there was nothing they could. I couldn't take anything for it. I would go to the ER. I waste like my out of pay was crazy at that time because it was this high deductible thing, and I would pay a lot of money to do all these
Yeah.
tests, and nothing would come out. And so I will find out when I sort of moved from the situation. I haven't had that problem since, but it just really speaks to how much your mind it controls your body. And like you say, like, we're trained to think that it's all everything's systemic, and some more organic. The root is actually in the organ. That's the cause of the problem, but it's not always it. My experience showed me that your brain can actually control your gut, all the parts of your body, and manifest in symptoms that you wouldn't expect.
A
So
hundred percent. 100%. Yeah. And I think something I like to highlight is that stress in and of itself is not a bad thing, right?
yeah,
But the problem is when stress becomes chronic and when it's not managed well. And then it really builds up. And then, that
exactly.
creates that ongoing cortisol surge, and you're always in that survival, fight, or flight mode, right? And so that's really, I think, the stress that we're talking about. How, stress is important in terms of day to day function, but it's also important that we actually check in with ourselves and make sure that we're managing it in a way that works for us.
Yeah, and I think that's something I should probably have done before it read it read its head in physical symptoms. So how do you when you see your clients or your patients, how do you tell them to manage their stress? Like, what are sort of tips that you give them to manage themselves? Because we are in the last few years we've had COVID, and there's now other economic issues, and a lot of people are generally feeling a lot of pressure right now. Not to talk of the general pressures, I think, of modern life, when you have a family and kids and jobs and you have to juggle everything. So I assume you've seen a lot of stress in your practice. And how do you handle it?
Yeah.
How do you tell people to to sort of manage it so that it doesn't overwhelm them and result in symptoms?
Yeah, for sure. And definitely, I think it's really important to have these conversations, especially when you are talking to patients, because I think sometimes people don't realize that certain symptoms get worse when they're more stressed out, right? So I think it is really important to highlight that. And I think for me, the first thing is to really create a very safe and open environment to have a conversation, right? So that people can actually feel comfortable to share of like, oh my gosh, I'm really stressed out right now. Like there's so much going on, or, I'm trying to juggle all these things. And I think that, to your point, that with a lot of the people who are high achievers and accomplished and all the things, like they have a lot of things going on, right? And so sometimes it's hard to really know where to start because they have so many moving pieces. And so I think it really comes down to keeping it very simple. Things like, okay, well, what is your current priority? Right? Because we want to do everything, right? But it's not that we can't have, success in different areas of life, but we also all have a limited amount of bandwidth and energy. And so it's really being intentional of like, okay, well, right now, what is your biggest focus, right? Is your priority your health? And then really looking to see your behaviors, is that matching up, right? Like if you're saying you really want to be healthy this year, but you're still working 90-hour weeks, right? You're not going to bed at a reasonable hour, like that's not consistent. And so I think it all comes down to awareness first and foremost. So having that very safe and supportive environment to have a conversation and to be in this place of curiosity, to be like, oh, okay, this is what's going on and these are my priorities. And let me just see, okay, where am I not aligned? And then start from there, right? And then also having the little bits of little easy tools that you can do just from different types of breathing exercises and stuff like that to help you with self-care throughout the day so that you can continually recharge and not get overwhelmed.
Yeah, those are really good points. And just to go back to one of the points that you made about really being able to admit, the role of stress. What do you think about the fact that sometimes people go to see their uh, healthcare providers, their doctors, the physicians, or somebody else, and they have all these stress-induced symptoms, and they're not taken seriously? Like, how would they handle that, or what is your suggestion in that? What are your thoughts about that? Because I think for a lot of people in the healthcare profession, it's all organic, and the role of the mind over causing bodily symptoms is not something that is often acknowledged.
You mean when they bring their symptoms and concerns to a practitioner and then they don't necessarily get recognized or
Validation,
acknowledged?
exactly. They're not validated. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do hear and see that, and I think that that's probably a whole other conversation about just the healthcare system and how things are. I think that as I talked about in my TEDx talk, that everyone is different, and so the things you need are different, and it's not one size fits all. And it's actually really important for you to be an advocate for yourself. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes when people go to a practitioner, a physician, or whatever, and um, for whatever reason, maybe their concerns were dismissed and whatever, and then I think it does unfortunately happen, but I think it's really a great opportunity for patients, for people in general. Just take this opportunity to really check in with yourself, because your body has the wisdom, your body has the intelligence. I always like to tell people, whatever you're feeling, really open up to it and understand and be open to actually understanding, like, hey, what is this trying to tell me? Right? It's like, instead of, if you're feeling a headache, if you're feeling achy, instead of just like grabbing that Tylenol, ibuprofen, like, what about just taking a moment to pause and ask yourself, like put your hand on your chest and be like, hey, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
And just listen and to see what comes up. And this is an experiment, and it's a practice that gets easier the more you do it. But I think that when we're talking about your health and well-being and working with practitioners, it really is important to have that connection with whoever you're working with. And if you feel like you're not being heard, if you don't feel like they understand you, or they have a different perspective or practice style or whatever, I mean, I think it's really important for you to listen to your inner guidance, to be like, hey, I think I don't know if this is the best fit, and that's okay, right? Because there's so many other practitioners out there. There's so many ways of healing, and in terms of just even medical care and practice. And I think the research has shown that patients do much better when they have a really great connection with their physician, provider, whoever it is, right? Because there's that level of trust to
Yeah,
really help and know
important.
that, they're not doing it alone.
Yeah, very, very important. True. So if a patient, for example, we have people in our groups that are under they have IBS attacks, flares when they are facing a stressful situation, or maybe they're in a stressful job, or they know that they have a lot of anxiety. Do you have some tips for how people can maybe prevent those flares, or if those flares happen, they can tamp them down that are due to things like stress and anxiety? So people have talked about yoga, meditation. Do you have any other tips to take care of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, as I mentioned before, it's really important to first be aware.
Okay.
Okay, so first, even recognizing what are your triggers, right? Like, what are the moments when you do get really anxious and stressed out? Is it every Sunday night, right? As you're going through your schedule for the upcoming week and you're like, oh my gosh, all these meetings.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
feel you're like, you
yeah,
right? You feel your stomach clench up, and all of that. So that's really important, right? First and foremost, because you want to know, like, sure, I can teach and share different tools and techniques that I'll talk about, but I think it's also really important to get to the root cause, right? It's like, why are you even having all this anxiety, right? Is this the right aligned job or position for you? Like, maybe it doesn't fit with your life right now in this phase of life that you're in, right? And that's okay. So I think that's really important to just understand, okay, what are your triggers? Like, what's actually going on? And then I would say, in terms of actual practical tools and techniques, definitely some of the things you mentioned are great: yoga, meditation, things like that. I would say, just bigger picture wise, to think about it as things that can help with the vagus nerve stimulation
okay,
in terms of helping you relax. Right. So we know about the vagus nerve as being really important in helping to regulate the parasympathetic system, which is in charge of the relaxation response. And so things like deep breathing techniques, right? Even things like humming, or using your vocal cords, because the vagus nerve runs through your throat, right? And then definitely meditation, yoga, just different types of, and being in nature, like all of these other practices are really important and helpful. And I think that what I want people to realize is that, again, it's not one size fits all. Okay, like, different things work for different people, and
yeah,
try it out and see, right? There's so many great modalities and techniques out there. For some people it could be meditating, and for others, I mean, I have people who just like cannot sit still, and that's fine. Like, exercise is their outlet.
well, yeah,
And so, I think it's just really, again, it comes back to being in alignment with who you are, listening to your inner voice, your guidance, and honoring that so that you can be well.
awesome, yeah. So, what sort of patients do you work with, and how do you work with them?
So I'm currently focusing on life coaching and not directly seeing patients, apart from a couple consultations here and there in an integrative manner and space. And what I love about coaching is really giving clients the resources, tools to really build their own toolbox, right? And I think so often we want that quick fix. We want to just like take care of it and be done. Um, but what I really love doing is being able to serve as a guide and to empower others and to teach them how to fish, right? Really understanding like, oh, where are the stressors coming from? How am I managing? Having tools and
Okay.
techniques to really manage so that they actually can really go through their life. Life is not about just like all rainbows, daisies, butterflies, always meant to
I
be
know.
positive and happy, right?
Yeah.
It's about, but it's having that resilience to be able to manage regardless of what happens, ups or downs, right? Knowing that you really are able to be confident and trust in yourself to take care of yourself no matter what.
So did you see a huge, uptick after COVID? Because I know the whole thing was so stressful for everybody, and I could see amongst at least the people around me a lot of, especially the younger, the teenagers, a lot of issues and anxieties. And I assume with everybody else, did you see any effect of COVID on your clients, or did they really affect your client
Definitely.
base? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the pandemic was a really, really big shock to
Yeah.
everyone. And I think that some people really, it was a wake up call for a lot of people, right? When you actually were forced to slow down,
Yeah.
to really see, okay, is this working? Is this working for me, right? Am I actually enjoying my job? And also in terms of relationships too, right?
Yeah.
I think that there are various relationships, whether it be marriages, partnerships, that either got closer or ended, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're like
Yeah.
spending all this time together at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. There's nowhere to hide, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're like, oh, maybe we're not that compatible.
Yeah.
so, so I think that definitely it's made a huge impact on everyone, and some people have really taken this opportunity to really dive into their own growth and evolution and understanding, and I think they've really come out even better and farther from where they were before. And so I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. And when people work with you, is it a long term thing, or do they, if they have a particular issue, is it a template, like you work with them for a certain amount of time until that issue is resolved, or is it a long term ongoing relationship?
So, in terms of coaching, I usually coach for a short period of time at a time. And I always say that, different things come up at different times in your life. And coaching is a really great resource and support for you. But I think that in different phases of your life, you need different things. And so I don't necessarily personally subscribe to just like sign up for a year of coaching or, whatever, because who knows where you're going to be in a year, right? But I do think that if there's something that's going on, especially I focus on the accomplished, successful women who are feeling
Okay.
unsettled. They like checked
Yeah.
off all the boxes and they're still feeling unfulfilled or like something's missing. And so in a short couple of months together, we're able to really reach that point of alignment so that they can get really grounded and they know who they are and they can continue to proceed this next chapter, this next phase in their life.
Yeah, I think that's an important, interesting point, because when women, you get to a certain age and you just sort of look back and say, who am I? Because for so long, women, you especially, you give yourself to so many things. You give yourself to your family, you give yourself to your work, you give yourself to your marriage, and you don't even know who you are exactly, because you've given so much of yourself to so many people. and you're just left with your, maybe you're not really yourself. You're somebody's mother, you're somebody's wife, you're somebody in the office, or especially doctors, you're this healer, and you don't even know who you yourself are, and what you like, and what your needs and desires. And so long it's something that has been swept under the rug. So I definitely see the need for that, and just getting into a better sense of understanding who you are and what exactly, your legacies, and where you're here. That's great. That's very helpful. That's very helpful. So, what is your philosophy when you work with your clients? Do you or your approach? I guess that's probably a better way to say it. What how do you approach working with your clients, or
So
your
I
style?
think
I'm sorry,
that,
maybe your style. Yeah, I was going to say maybe
so
your.
I
I want to say your style. Yeah, I think the delay. Sorry.
so I would say that I take an integrative mind, body, spirit approach to working with
Okay.
clients. And I really think it's important to look at all areas of you, right? And because again, I talk about how we can't just look at the leaves, we want to look at the roots, like what's actually inside. And I always believe that whatever you desire, it's possible for you.
Okay.
I think as a coach, it's really important to hold that space and create that container for your clients to transform, right? To really hold that belief for them and to help them get to where they want to go. And I always say that they have the wisdom, they have the answers, but I'm able to support and guide them through this process and journey. And I think it's a really fulfilling and just very gratifying experience to be able to help people transform really from the subconscious identity level so that they really can reinvent themselves, so that they can move towards and really lead that life they've always dreamed of. And I think there's just nothing more beautiful. One of the most popular lines that was highlighted or quoted from my best-selling book is that it's only when you're well can you do your most important work in life, which is to share your gifts and make the world a better place.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, awesome. Yeah, thanks for mentioning your book, because I was just going to segue into that. Can you tell us a little bit about your book? I think it's a very useful resource for people interested in the mind body connection. Can you
Happy
tell
to
us a little bit
share.
more?
Yeah.
Sure.
So my book is called So Much Better, and it's a best selling self help book that's based in mindfulness. And in it, I share life changing strategies to develop calm, confidence, and curiosity to become your own inspiring success story. And it's really a very practical resource and guide for people all around, especially those unfulfilled high achievers. And I wrote the book because after working with so many different clients, I kept seeing the same things come up again and again. And I wanted to provide a very simple blueprint for people to be able to start this process for themselves, even if we weren't going to work together directly. So it's a really great resource for anyone who's interested. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles.
Awesome. So that's so important, because so many books just talk theory, and just having the practical steps is more important than at least for people to put in practice is more important than the theory and the detail. I mean, that's important, but just knowing how to use it in your own life is really important. So, how do people find you or follow you if they want to follow you and read more about what you're doing, your work, and get more inspiration from what you're doing?
Definitely. So I'm available on social media. My handle is at Cindy Tsai MD, CINDYTSAIMD. I'm primarily on LinkedIn and Instagram, where I share content regularly. I have a weekly newsletter. You're welcome to sign up by going to my website, cindysaiMD.com. I have a
Awesome.
free 5-day self-care course. And so if you sign up, you'll be able to get that free course, join my list, and get all the updates. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. We'll definitely put all this stuff in the show notes so everybody who wants to know more about what Dr. Sai is doing can go to the show notes and follow her there and catch up with her there. So thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Sai. Very useful information for our listeners, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find out more about today's guest and episode in the show notes at Casa de Sante's website, casadesante.com.